How is it rocking, Dwayne Nation? Stay here because we are just about to get underway. In the meantime, please like, comment, and subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. We put out weekly sports content, and we want to continue to build up Dwayne Nation and the brand that is Dwayne Sports. Thank you all, and enjoy. Welcome in, Dwayne Nation. This is your host, Justin Paez, alongside Genoa Agudelo, and we got two guests for you guys today. We got JoJo and John Michael, and we're going to discuss the starts and sits of the week. We got to start and we got to sit, each of us, so you're going to hear 8 players' names. I'm really excited for this episode, getting into the nitty-gritty of fantasy football for Week 7. But before we get to everything that's on tap for this episode, JoJo, how are you feeling today, man?
Feeling good, Justin. Man, just excited for this week, as I've said, and man, I'm just looking forward to. We got a lot of key matchups this week, man. A lot of potential game of the years in one weekend. I mean, I don't think you can ask for anything else. And yeah, just thanks for having us, and I can't wait to see, what changes to make to my fantasy lineup and whatnot.
Yeah, I agree. How you doing, John Michael?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm glad we're on the topic of fantasy because, just the league, the fantasy league that we're all in together, I'm currently number 1 at 5-1. So I feel like I have a lot to offer here. Also lead the league in scoring. So, I just feel like there's a lot to the table I can bring here to try to get you guys. Yeah, exactly. To resurrect y'all's season if you're negative, or keep you on the high horse if you guys are number 1 or number 2 in your leagues. I got you guys. Don't worry.
And Genoa, my brother, how you feel? We got guests and we got to talk starts and sits.
Oh, Dwayne Nation, I'm doing good. Justin, I'm doing good. John Michael, I'm not too far away down in that league there, and I do have Cooper Kupp coming back, so I'm feeling really good in that league.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what my team is. I know I lost pretty bad to you last week, Genoa, in this league. My team Tater Nuts is not doing very great.
I'm 3-3. I'm still playoff hopes.
I'm 3-3 too. Yeah.
I want to be known, Genoa. I want you to be able to tell these people what happens because me and Genoa play this week. Ooh. I want you to be able to tell the people what happens here. All right.
Cooper Kupp, save me.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got Broncos D tonight.
I do.
D. All right.
Oh dang! Come on, Spencer Rattler. Let's go.
Yeah, he's throwing some picks. Let me tell you.
Yeah, that's a good start. No Rashid, no Olave.
Oh yeah, I agree. Dang. There's like Bub Means and Jawan Johnson. And of course, Kamara.
Yeah,
and Patrick Surtain has been crazy this year.
Well, he's out.
He's out.
That's the only thing. I
didn't know that.
Yeah. Hey, don't worry. Yeah. Come on, man.
Yeah, Broncos got it. I agree.
Yeah.
But yeah, all right. Let's dive into starts of the week. Excited to discuss my start of the week for Week 7, and I have Devon Achane. Now, obviously, in the first couple weeks and heading into the season, you're like, oh, he's going to be a set-it-and-forget-it starter. Like, he's going to be just fine. But with the injury to Tua and how the last couple of games have gone, obviously, and then he got concussed, and then the bye week, you haven't seen a good Devon Achane game in about, 3 weeks. And it's been kind of tough to have him in your lineups. And now moving into this week, he's back from the injury. He's got full participant in practice all week. So he should be ready to go from the concussion and in the bye week. And they play the Colts, who have been very under average in giving points to the running back. And so I expect a big game for Devon Achane. And looking at this game, I think the Colts are going, the Dolphins are really going to want to get on track, in the week before Tua returns. And the fact that, I feel like a lot of fantasy managers are down on Devon Achane. In the last, 4 weeks, he's been running back 64. Like, it's been really, really darn bad. But they get a game that I feel like this offense had a week to kind of refine itself and get set up for the Colts. And the Colts have usually just been in games where it's just been back and forth, and we've seen a lot of good offense. So Devon Achane is my start of the week. What do you think on that, JoJo?
I like it, and I've also been seeing that, post bye week that they've been preparing for other teams, and with Tyler Huntley at quarterback, I do think that Tyreek Hill could be another option, Justin, too. I like the Achane take because of this scenario. And the Colts are allowing a pretty good amount of yardage in that area, so I can see it. Justin, Achane needs his breakout. He needs it.
What do you think, John Michael?
I would say I like it if Genoa did not have Devon Achane on his fantasy team this week. So I'm kind of I'm going to disagree with you just for this week. But as far as my other leagues go where I'm not playing Devon Achane, I could actually see it because Tyler Huntley, like Johannan said, they're coming off the bye week. They're preparing. Tyler Huntley runs a lot. Like, obviously, with Tyler Huntley, the offense is a lot different than it is with Tua. There's a lot more run plays, read options, a lot of screen passes because they don't trust Tyler Huntley's arm as much. So I think that they'll be feeding Tyreek Hill and Devon Achane, especially underneath, just trying to let their best players after the catch do what they do best, make people miss and try to get the yardage. So unfortunately, if it costs me if it costs me a loss this week, then I'll be upset that you called it out. But I will have to say I do not hate it because I think the Colts give up. I think they're like bottom half of the league in points to running backs this season too. So it's like their defense isn't anything that special. And with AR back, he's the starter. He's liable to turn the ball over, meaning that they might be on offense more, so more chances for Devon.
Janelle, what do you think, my dog?
Here's the thing, though. Raheem Mostert is healthy. He's practiced, and he's good to go. He doesn't have an injury designation going into this weekend. So a little bit concerning there for Devon Achane owners, as well as they don't have, Tua moving the ball. And, Justin and JoJo and John, we've kind of taken Tua a little bit for granted. Even last year, we're all down on it. You don't know if Tua's the guy. We've taken it for granted because Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle's stock have dropped tremendously. And that's also kind of tied in with, Achane. He hasn't gone over 10, points in his last 3 games. Obviously, last week they had the bye week. So maybe potentially out of the bye week, they can start hot and fresh. Maybe Mike McDaniels has a whole scheme ready to go. So I'm hoping Achane has a great game there in Indianapolis.
All right. We'll jump to start of the week, number 2. What do you got for us, JoJo?
Wait, hold on. I just want to say something. I want to be known, by the way. Genoa in that conversation put Devon Achane into his starting lineup in fantasy. So I have to say, like, he went from Austin Eckler as his starter and he put in Devon Achane after that. So Justin, if you cost me this week, I'm not gonna lie, we're gonna have to see each other because that's insane. I noticed. I was staring at it. I was like, oh my God. As soon as he said Devon Achane, I was like, Genoa's about to put him in the starting lineup. I knew it.
That's funny.
I didn't think you noticed. Wow, that's hilarious.
All right. Well, hey, now I'm sorry, John Michael, that I had to do that to you. H10. Aggie. I got to put for my Aggie. So.
Yeah. There you go. Gig 'em.
All right.
Yes, sir. What do you got, JoJo?
Yeah. So I'm gonna go to start with the start. So I think that my start of the week is a person who really has a lot of upside, and we've seen, we saw him this past week, just destroy Cowboys, and it's a player that's kind of feel like underlooked in this league. Because of the other receiving targets in Detroit Lions, and his name is Jameson Williams. He's my start of the week. I just can't help but the 1 week that I think I've only started him 2 weeks in one of my leagues, and the 1 week I started him, it was his dud game. But other than that, Justin and John and Genoa, he's top 75 yards in all of those games, and he's had 14 or more fantasy points, and we're looking at a potential shootout here in Minnesota, and I think that Jameson Williams goes unnoticed, maybe 1 or 2 plays, and we could be looking at a 60 to 50 yarder to the house. His upside is just too much for me to look away from, and I do, like I said, a high scoring game plus upside, plus he's been killing it. I think that equals awesome this week.
Genoa?
I like it. I like Jameson Williams. I think he can have he's having a really good season. And some weeks he's looked as good as Amon-Ra St. Brown has. He's been kind of the more deep threat in this Lions offense. I know Laporta had a big time touchdown outside of 40 yards, I believe. But this team is gonna just be, this Detroit team is unbelievable this year. I think they're a little bit better than Minnesota, and I do like Jameson Williams, scoring another touchdown this week.
All right, John Michael, what do you think on that?
I like it a lot, actually. Literally, just like it wasn't last game. It wasn't against the Cowboys, but the week before that, my friend Jacob.
Seattle.
Yeah. He had Jameson Williams, and he was going against. It was his only player left, and his opponent had Amon-Ra and Seattle's kicker. And they were like almost tied going into that game. Jameson Williams caught like a 60-yard touchdown, and housed it across the middle. It was like a 15-yard, 20-yard post, and he housed it for like 60. That single-handedly won him the game. And that's literally Jameson Williams' whole fantasy upside right there, is like what Joe Hannon said. I agree. I think he's going to go accounted for 1, 2, maybe 3 plays. And I think in those plays, he's going to make them pay for it, because the Vikings secondary it's not the craziest roster. It's a very well coached defense, but it's not the craziest roster in terms of athleticism and whatnot, especially comparing to Jameson Williams' speed and acceleration that he brings to the table. Those plays that he goes unaccounted for, I'm with him. I feel like it could actually just be the dark horse in this game. I feel like Jameson Williams could be the difference maker in this game, actually. So I like the take.
And sorry, Joseph, and not to mention that the Vikings they're giving up the 4th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers right now, along with the 5th most receiving yards. So that's something to consider.
No, I completely agree. But the way I look at it for Jameson this week is, I think obviously from the bold predictions episode, I have high hopes for Amon-Ra this week to get a lot of targets. I think Jameson has a good week if he has like a 50-plus yard touchdown. Like, I think that's kind of where it's going to happen for them. Maybe a broken play or a really good scheme play from Detroit gets Jameson open for a long touchdown, and that's kind of where we see it. You know, I kind of see he might not hit that reception total we really want, but he's going to get the yardage. But yeah, so that I like that there as your start of the week, Jameson Williams. We'll jump to John Michael. Who do you have as your start of the week?
You know, I obviously had one player. I've been preaching him all day, though, so I'm going to stray away from the Drake May start, right? Obviously start him, but that's not the name I'm going to say. I was between a couple names, but the name that I'm going to go with is Brian Robinson Jr. against Carolina. Carolina has let up the most points against running backs all season. He's coming off of an injury, right? So some people may look at that as a negative. I feel like all that's done is that's given his body more rest aside from the injury. Like I said, Jaden Daniels on fire right now. They had a tough game against the Ravens, right? But that was without Brian Robinson. Like I said, Carolina's defense, with the loss of Derek Brown, their only good defensive player, in my opinion, or their best, I should say. It's definitely come at the cost of letting the running backs do what they please with them, especially the run game. Jane Daniels and Brian Robinson Jr. In particular, I feel like is going to have one of the best games of his career against the Carolina Panthers this weekend. And I feel like it's going to be a blowout, in my opinion. I feel like Jaden Daniels and Brian Robinson Jr. are going to lead the charge in a massive blowout against the Panthers. Massive blowout.
Yeah, I like it a lot. In our list with me and Justin, I have B-Rob / Eckler. Just in case, I do think B-Rob is questionable, but I do think he plays. But even, B-Rob is going to have a great game. He is such a pure rusher. I definitely love him to go over 100 yards. If he's active, definitely on all price picks there. I think his line is like 70-something yards here. They change it every day, honestly. But I do like him to get 100 yards as well as a touchdown. Carolina's goal line defense is absolutely terrible. I mean, they allowed 100 yards to Tyler Algier last week, as well as Bijan had 95 and 2 touchdowns. So we're looking at almost a total of 200 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns out of the running game last week at home. So I can only imagine in Washington, with Jaden Daniels getting all the attention from defenses, I definitely like John's take on going with B-Rob here.
What do you think, JoJo?
Yeah, that is a great start. I mean, as I've seen, the Panthers have given up 12 touchdowns to running backs on the year, and just to build onto that stat pad, no other team has given up more than 8. So that is an increased amount of touchdowns that are being handed to running backs in these games. So Brian Robinson's going to eat it. I think that was a little missing piece last week in Baltimore. I think Washington puts up a better fight with Brian Robinson. So Brian Robinson, as you can tell, he's a key factor. I like that.
The way I'm kind of ciphering through this is, obviously if B-Rob was at 100% health, he might go for 100, 30 yards and 2 scores on like 20 carries. But heading into this week, I know he's listed as limited, on Thursday's practice. I think he will come into this game where the Commanders they're going to realize that, hey, we're going to be up big on this team. Let's not give B-Rob all of these touches, through like the middle of the field. I think it's going to be similar to how that Browns game was, where he didn't get a lot of touches in that game, but he was, obviously given those goal line carries. So I could see maybe B-Rob not hitting the yards that we want, but I think he might go for 2 to 3 touchdowns because the Commanders are going to be in scoring range every drive that they're on the field. But that's kind of my thought on it. But I think he still is a great play for your fantasy lineups. And to round out our starts of the week, I think it is you, Genoa.
I'm going to go with a guy that, in our predictions episode, I said his team is going to win big, and they play on Sunday Night Football. I'm going to go with Aaron Rodgers. I loved what he was able to do last week at home. Not yet. The trade wasn't official yet. It was the next day they made the trade. And, you look at what they have. They do have a great running game, a phenomenal running game with Breece Hall, who catches passes out of the backfield. And then they had Braylon Allen, who's pretty good. And I think that'll be able to move the chains. But they do have Garrett Wilson, who's an exceptional wide receiver. And he was picked in most first rounds, into first, beginning of second rounds in this year's drafts. And now they add Devontae Adams, who, hey, they have a lot of reports together. Devontae Adams is good to go for this week. He has no injury designated. I know he was, quote-unquote, hurt when he left the Raiders. But him and Aaron Rodgers are going to pick up where they left off. I think he's going to have 100 yards, and Devontae Adams. I think Garrett Wilson possibly can have 100 yards in the touchdown. And also Alan Lazard. So they have kind of the band back together with Garrett Wilson. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be feeling really comfortable. Yes, that O-line isn't as good as it was in Green Bay. They're going to have to figure out how to kind of keep TJ Watt away from Rodgers. But I do think that it doesn't matter. Looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, they have been pretty solid to opposing quarterbacks. But look, these are the quarterbacks they played. Kirk Cousins, who week 1 was struggling a little bit. He hadn't hit his stride yet. Week 2, they were, a rookie Bo Nix. They played Justin Herbert, who I think got dinged up in that game, got hurt. And then they played, AR, who got hurt in that game as well. And then Joe Flacco came in and actually threw for 2 touchdowns on them. And then, Dak Prescott that next week was able to go in there. I think he passed for 2 touchdowns there, 200 yards. Obviously, last week they were able to dominate the Raiders, but hey, they didn't have Devontae Adams. And Aiden O'Connell is probably one of the worst starting quarterbacks in this league at the moment. And so I think this is the week that Steelers kind of, let down their guard there. And Aaron Rodgers goes out there and has a phenomenal game there, even it being on the road. I've just been a little bit impressed than most people with this Jets offense. I'm really confident for Rodgers to get 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. And he has the targets to pick apart this defense. This defense is, Dak Prescott was able to go in there and pick him apart with CD and Jalen Tolbert. So I like it with Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard in that running game. So give me Aaron Rodgers as my start of the week.
All right, John Michael, what do you think? Your division rival, Aaron Rodgers, Jets, how's he going to do?
Unfortunately, I do not hate it because I actually like Genoa's take on that game, how that was going to go out. I didn't think they were going to score as many points as he said, but I did think it was going to be a high-scoring game for them. I just feel like it's like he said, they got the band back together, but it's like at the cost of the O-line, they also get Garrett Wilson, and a better defense, in my opinion. So it's like I could see him. The only thing that's going to come that's not going to be in the best interest for Aaron Rodgers' start is obviously his lack of rushing ability. And especially the only possible negative I could see is a strip sack fumble or something forced by TJ Watt, which obviously just results in negative points. That's the only thing I could see that could possibly affect Aaron Rodgers having a really high scoring game in fantasy this week. Literally just all comes down to TJ Watt, but I like it. I do think, I'm not gonna lie, I think it's possible that Aaron Rodgers gets 4 touchdowns, all passing to different receivers. We're talking Devontae, Garrett, Lazard, and even Breece Hall. If Breece Hall doesn't rush it in, because like he said, he catches passes out the backfield. I think him and Kamara are tied for the most targets a game at 6. Out of running back, 6 targets a game is actually a fairly decent amount. So I could see it. I like it. Like I said, it's all going to come down to TJ Watt.
What do you think, JoJo?
Yeah, I love this take personally, and that's coming from a guy who's playing Aaron Rodgers in his main league. Just a little scared to play Rodgers this week, only because when you look at Jets on paper, like for example, even before Devontae Adams' addition, they're a great team. I mean, they have a great defense. They have a Hall of Fame quarterback. They have Brees Hall. They have Braylon Allen as he's a beast in the backup running back, and he can do it all. And then now you had Garrett Wilson, Lazard, and then now you have Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, Lazard, and that it's almost becoming even a more stacked team on roster. But they're not performing it in action. But we did see a glimpse of that. We saw a glimpse of that last week. And I think that they get it going here in Pittsburgh. And we talked about Aaron Rodgers' history versus Pittsburgh. And sometimes you do good against teams. And I think this is a team that he's going to do good against this week as well.
Yeah, and I think it's weird that Aaron Rodgers is only owned in 57% of ESPN leagues. So he might even just be out on the waiver wire right now, Dwayne Nation, that, hey, maybe you need that quarterback this week, or you're not even paying attention, or maybe you're starting a guy you don't love this week. Like, I'm so on Kyler Murray this week, for example, just because he's been so inconsistent. Maybe right out there is Aaron Rodgers. You can go out there and grab a quarterback to start, and we expect big things from Aaron Rodgers this week. Now we're going to move, though. We're going to transition to the sad side of fantasy football, but it will be also equally as helpful for your fantasy lineups. We have our sits of the week. Each of us are going to bring one to the table that we think you cannot have in your fantasy lineups, and they will be a detriment. I'll start us off here, and I'm going to go with Zack Moss, Cincinnati Bengals running back. Obviously, the Bengals are going into Cleveland, and also we just seen a change in that Cincinnati backfield where Chase Brown has kind of become the guy that the Bengals want to rely on, and the offense kind of has reflected that. They've been really good the last few weeks, and I think that's a testament to how more involved Chase Brown has been. And I think Zack Moss, when we come into this week where we think that Cleveland might keep this a little bit closer than we expect, I think Cleveland's defense is going to lock in. And the only way Zack Moss has a good day is if he falls in the painted area for a touchdown. But I don't have high hopes for it. What do you think on that, John Michael?
Yeah, I like it a lot, especially because of Cleveland's roster. The front seven is the best part of their whole roster, in my opinion. I mean, it's obviously led by Myles Garrett. We know what he does in the pass rush and the run game. But, I mean, their defense in the front seven has always been really good. They've always found a way to make middle linebackers, any middle linebacker off the street, just into a star. I'm mind blanking on his name right now, but I think they got him from the Falcons. Or it could have been vice versa. They're starting middle linebacker right now.
Is it Zadarius Smith?
Yeah, Zadarius Smith. Thank you. I don't think. Wait, he's not their middle linebacker, but I think he's their outside linebacker. But yes, he's been really good against the run, and he's been decent in the pass rush this year. But they're really good on the front seven, and like you said, the backfield for the Bengals is already not their strong suit in the offense. It's obviously the pass game with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. So a backfield that's already not the high point of an offense, becoming lackluster and becoming 50-50 with who's going to get the most touches in the game out of the running backs, that's just never a good recipe. So I'm with you, Zack Moss and Chase Brown. In my opinion, I don't see them being as starts this week, either of them.
JoJo?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I own Zack Moss in one of my leagues, and I just think that he has been a little lackluster. Whenever I saw him fumble one of the games, just kind of like, man, this guy's really not as good as I hoped he would be. And, you do have the involvement of Chase Brown, and also the fact that the Bengals are getting going through the air right now, and you're going into a tough bank field with the Browns, with the tough defense. I mean, I just really don't like the matchup. It doesn't really appeal me, and I do agree with you. I would say sit him.
Yeah, Justin, I would say as far as if there was a list on top 5, 6 most droppable players just this week only in the fantasy world, I think Zack Moss is up there. I kind of like what I've seen out of Chase Brown. I think he is the potential future. It just sucks as we had high hopes for Zack Moss, and I think he gave us a goose egg this past week. He has not looked good at all, and I've seen him on the waiver wire. I had to drop him in one of our leagues, and 2 of my other leagues I've seen him being dropped. And Chase Brown is kind of developing into that next guy. Not to mention that Cincinnati is a pass-heavy offense. They have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and this Cleveland defense is definitely going to be able to stop the run. I am even a little concerned for Chase Brown, but he is a guy that you must start. If you have a guy like Swift on the bye, obviously you're not starting anybody from Dallas that's on a bye, but If you have guys that are hurt, maybe like your little question about Jordan Mason or, maybe, you
Andre.
had McCaffrey or something like that. It could be a guy that you could start in Chase Brown, but definitely a little concern. And I'm really, really OUT on Zack Moss. He's kind of in that tier with Zamir White on running backs that you're just not confident at all going forward in the season.
Yeah, I think you play it perfectly. We're all kind of aligned on there. We'll jump to the next sit of the week. What do you got, John Michael?
So mine is kind of like, it's not one player. It's just like, I'll just tell it to you. Any running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Oh,
That backfield has gone through too much switching, swapping, who's going to get the most touches, who's getting the receiving looks, right? Who's getting the goal line touches. It already started. Rachaad White wasn't having the best end of the season in terms of rushing last year. Then the start of this year, he looked really rocky. So Bucky Irving was starting to get more of the pure running touches. Anything between the tackles, he was getting a lot of. Rachaad White became outside. And then what was it? Week 5, I think that rookie running back for him had like a phenomenal game too.
it was last week.
Last
Sean
last
Tucker.
week. Yeah. Him. It's like that's 3 running backs right there that you've gotten production out of in different aspects. And that's not to mention on top of that, the Baltimore Ravens have the 4th least amount of points led up to running backs all year in fantasy. So in a game that I think is going to be a shootout, and we could potentially see the Bucks down a little bit for majority of it, not down a lot, but just down. They know that they're going to have to pass a lot. I just wouldn't start any of the running backs. I think Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are going to get a majority of the fantasy points, of fantasy love, along with Baker Mayfield. I just wouldn't trust that backfield, especially against as good of a front seven as the Ravens have been this year with Roquan, Kyle Van Noy, and the rest of their front seven. It's a tough matchup. I wouldn't trust it going into the Monday night game.
I completely agree. I actually had Bucky Irving as a sit, one of my sits of the week, but I decided to go Zack Moss. So I'm glad we both got to discuss there that there is worry. The fact that the Ravens defense, as you mentioned, is very good against the run, and particularly they've been pretty bad against the pass. They've been kind of a pass funnel. So Tampa Bay is definitely going to lean on that, I think, more. And then it's just tough to trust 3 running backs when they're all doing well, but like not all of them can eat. So I completely agree with you have there. What do you think on it, JoJo?
Yeah, I agree, and it's worth considering that Rachaad White is questionable as well. But I will say I agree because it has been really confusing, and I do like what I've seen out of Bucky actually compared to Rachaad White. So I think that there is a little bit of upside of one of them, but however, it's something that I don't want to get in the middle of, and I'm like John Michael said, I'm leaning more towards the receiving end of that game, just being more of a shootout for the Buccaneers side, that is, not the Ravens, but I do think that Buccaneers are going to get it going in the air and not running back wise, just because of that, mix. You can't really put your best bet on either of those running backs. It's a tough scenario. I agree with John.
Yeah, I agree. Rachaad White has been one of the biggest disappointments in this fantasy season. He had a great back half of last season, and he's not even utilized. And the guy, the third string running back, comes out and scores almost 40 fantasy points last week. And then Sean Tucker. Obviously, Bucky Irving's been pretty decent, a pretty good, daily fantasy kind of play. But we're not sure if Tampa Bay is going to keep going handing in the ball with Sean Tucker having a great game. So they're very unpredictable. Obviously, Tampa is a pass-heavy, offense. And, obviously this game is going to be kind of focused on Godwin, Mike Evans, possibly even like, Cade Otton. And so I do think that this is more of a passing kind of game for Tampa Bay. Baltimore's really, really, solid and stout there on stopping the run there. So I'm there with John Michael. Definitely Tampa Bay's running backs is something that you just got to stay far away as possible.
All right. So John Michael is worried about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers running backs. JoJo, who are you worried about this week?
Yeah, I'm worried about I'm kind of going to use John Michael's like kind of idea of just like as a whole rather than one player, but I'll get focused on 2 players in particular. But I'm going to go with Steelers receiving group. I would stay away from them this week. I feel like I don't like it Sunday night. When we look at the Jets, they have a good defense. I really think they're a great defense. In terms of wide receivers, fantasy points per game, they allow the 4th fewest. And in terms of tight end, they allow the 6th or 7th fewest. So that puts me in the eyes of Pat and and Pickens. And when I look at these guys, I mean, when you first let's start with Pickens. I mean, he's only scored more than 11, I believe. Yeah, topped 11 in 2 of his 6 games, and I think that this a little lackluster in my opinion. And he's going to be seeing Sauce a lot in this game, and that's something to consider. And then you have Pat, who's been also lackluster. He's very touchdown dependent, and if we don't see a touchdown at Pat, which I don't think we see a touchdown, I think these are 2 lackluster performances we see again on Sunday versus this Jets team that we expect more out of. And I don't know. I would stray away from Pittsburgh receiving crew for this reason, and I think that they're going to struggle with that switch of Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. And maybe we see a lack of chemistry here. Maybe we see a lack of motivation or whatever it is. We don't know, but I'm not with the switch, and I don't think that it's gonna impact them very much, in the positive aspect that is.
All right, I'm interested what you think on that, Genoa.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a little odd. First of all, I don't understand the Justin Fields slander at all. I don't understand why you bench a guy that's already gotten you to a 4-2 record. He's played pretty well. I mean, he's done enough to, and I think he's capable of winning this game had he started against the Jets, rather than a guy who hasn't played all year. He had an injury, throughout training camp and whatnot, and so not to mention that Russell Wilson's stint in Denver was absolutely a disaster. And they weren't able to figure things out, and I don't think what's going to be the difference here. And I do think that I feel like Russell should have been traded. I don't know why he's starting, but there's something weird going on in Pittsburgh. I'm not really being able to put my finger on it, so I agree with Janet there.
Mm-hmm.
John Michael.
I'm actually gonna disagree here.
Ooh.
Now listen, and this is purely because I actually think that the Jets are going to be up a good majority of the game. I think that we could see a lot of, especially if you're in a full PPR league or just even a half PPR, I feel like we could see a lot of garbage time points, in particular for Pat Freiermuth. That's the main one I would disagree with. I agree with the George Pickens on Sauce. I don't think George Pickens is a good enough wide receiver to hang with Sauce Gardner, especially with the switch, the lack of chemistry like he was talking about. Russell Wilson, in my opinion, is the better passer than Justin Fields, just from his career and what we're looking at, not basing it off of his stint with the Broncos. If it's that Russell Wilson, then absolutely stay away. But I think that this Russell Wilson is going to be a little bit different. I could see a lot of garbage time points for Pat Freiermuth, a lot of check downs, maybe some curls, hooks, anything over the middle, maybe even some baby out routes or whatnot. Just a lot of garbage time points for Pat in particular. George Pickens, maybe stay away from. Van Jefferson, I could see maybe like one deep bomb for him, like 20 yards or 30 yards, something like that. So I would hold out for garbage time points with Pat Freiermuth. And just because if we're looking at the Jets defense, the Jets secondary is better than their front seven, in my opinion. It's very tough though, just because of Quinnen Williams, CJ Mosley, all that, but or the Williams brothers. But I don't know. I have this gut feeling Pat Freiermuth's going to see some garbage time points, and I feel like it could put him 15, maybe 20 points if he catches a touchdown. I see him and Najee Harris being their 2 touchdowns of the night. I think they do put up 2 touchdowns, but like I said, it's going to be garbage time touchdowns. And I have this suspicion, especially with as low as the tight end production has been this year, Pat Freiermuth might be something to look out on.
I'm interested that you did that twist on it, because honestly, I wasn't thinking. I was more on the side that no, but I think you convinced me that I think Freiermuth might have a good game, at least a good game in a tight end aspect. If you put up a touchdown, you're having a good game as a tight end.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree, and with the fact that Russell Wilson, to me, it could go either way. He hasn't played all season, coming off an injury. But he's the more accurate pocket passer, like as of history between Justin Fields and stuff. But I definitely anti George Pickens. But Pat Freiermuth, as the tight end 10 on the season, you might have to start him. And so it's not the scariest start. But I agree. Most Steelers players, I'm not super excited about this week. And to wrap up our sits of the week, or close out with your sit of the week.
I'm going to go with Tony Pollard. Now, I know he's had a back-to-back great games there You got to look at the game script here. Will Levis for the Titans, he's been one of the memes of this year, and I think he's going to have a terrible game. You got to think about it this way. Buffalo hasn't had a home game in 3 games, okay? They went to play my beloved Texans. They played at Baltimore, and then they played at the Jets. So I do think that, that Orchard Park in Buffalo is going to be rocking, and their defense is going to, get key stops. I don't think they're going to allow any conversion in the first half. And I think Josh Allen's going to start off hot, potential 14-0, 21-3 lead at halftime. And I think that Will Levis and the Titans and with Brian Callahan, they're going to abandon the running game and just be pass. Obviously, Buffalo is one of the starts of the week at the defensive spot in fantasy. And so I don't think Buffalo generates much yards there. Or Tennessee doesn't generate much yards there in Buffalo. And so that's very concerning. Tony Pollard's had 2 great games, so I think he's due for, a really bad game there. And, they played a tough defense a few weeks ago in Green Bay at home. And so, that was, I think they have a tough defense in Buffalo. Obviously, Buffalo let Breece Hall kind of run all over them last week, but that's Breece Hall. He's one of the, first, top 5 picks in fantasy this year. I think with Tony Pollard and that stagnant, offensive line in Tennessee, I just don't think they get much, yards done.
Okay. What do you think on that, John Michael?
I like it. Like he said, I think the Titans are going to be getting blown out a majority of the game, in my opinion. And like he said, they're going to abandon the run game, right? Most of his points are going to come from check downs, anything like that, screens, right? So I really like it. I do. Honestly, it's like he said, 2 great games in a row. He is due, and unfortunately, it is against a really good Buffalo defense. Like he said, Breece Hall is Breece Hall for a reason, right? There's a lot to worry about on that Jets defense. So obviously Breece Hall is able to get his touches and whatnot when you have to worry about Garrett Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Alan Lazard, Tyler Conklin. I mean, who are you worrying about on the Titans? I mean, Calvin Ridley just had 8 to 10 targets with 0 catches last week. I mean, like who are we really worrying about on the Titans? So it's like, if we're not worrying about Tony Pollard, then you're not worried about anybody on the Titans, in my opinion. So it's, I just don't see it being a good game for him. The game script, like he said, it's just not in his favor.
All right, JoJo, what do you think on that?
I'm a huge, I'm a huge fan of the Bills defense this week. I'm starting them in a lot of my leagues. And just, Tennessee doesn't have much to offer. However, I will say, I think Tony Pollard is the only bright spot in this scenario. And I was a little scared and hesitant of starting them because of this. There's a statistic that Bills have been allowing the second most, I believe, rushing touchdowns, that is, or points per game or something like points per game, I think, to running backs. And also they allowed the most receiving touchdowns, I believe, to running backs. And I think Tony Pollard offers that, that asset and that skill value in that area. And also, just Bills are not that good against the run. I mean, we're not comparing Tony to Derrick Henry, but we all saw the massacre that he laid on them. And I just feel like maybe Tony Pollard, he's worth actually a flex play, I think, in my opinion. So I'm going to have to disagree with you there. I think he's worth a little flex play. He might get like a lot of receptions maybe, or maybe he might even get in the end zone. But overall, I would say I am on the opposite end of that. I do think that Tony Pollard might just be the only thing Tennessee has to offer in this matchup.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to jump on your side, JoJo. I do think that Pollard's in line for a good game, and I think it can partly depend on how fast the Bills, jump out to the lead. If they're up, 21, 24-0 by the, mid-second quarter, then I might be worried. But I think, as you mentioned, the Bills have struggled against running backs all season long. And I think a bit of information we haven't mentioned, Tyjae Spears has not practiced this week, and he might be out, which means Pollard would get just literally everything in that offense. In the check down game would be interesting to see. He might get a bunch of catches. But that's kind of where I would stand, similar to what you said, JoJo. It is a tough environment to play in, and the Bills have been pretty solid on defense. But I think that Pollard's in line for at least a very solid game. Should be a top 15 running back on the week. But yes, Dream Nation, that is our starts and sits of the week. We went in extensive depth on these 8 players, guys that you need to have in your lineups, guys that you need to not have in your lineups. And I'm kind of sad now because it wraps up our week 7 discussions. it wraps up our guests of the week. You know, JoJo and John Michael. I really appreciate you guys coming on. This has been so much fun. We've been going at it for hours talking about starts of the week, bold predictions, game predictions, and some trades that happened this week with Devontae Adams and Amari Cooper. We will definitely have you guys back on. So I appreciate you guys coming on. And as always, Genoa, send us out, man.
Yo, Dween Nation, it was fun. Thank you guys for listening to us. JoJo, John Michael, thanks for joining us on these episodes today, man. We, feel free to reach out to us. We love to have you guys back on the show, man. We want to make you guys, here and there if you guys are free. So thanks for joining us. And Justin, this is a great kind of collection of episodes heading into week 7. It's going to be a fun weekend. And so we're so excited to cover what happens, next week and kind of leading to week 8 and on and on. It's been a fun season, Dween Nation. So thanks for listening. We love you guys. And as always, peace.
Peace.